It was supposed to be just another Friday, and I was exhausted from working late to finish the report for the presentation on Monday. I drove into the driveway of our suburban house. It was the house that Emily and I bought 8 years ago when we first found out she was pregnant. I was overwhelmed with emotion at the sight of my son Josh, the light of my life, and the glue that had held me together through the long years and countless sleepless nights of adulthood. I walked into the house calling Emily's name, expecting her usual greeting or the sound of Josh's laughter from the living room, but I was greeted by silence. The house was silent, as if holding its breath, waiting for me to arrive. "Emily, Josh!" I called again, leaving my briefcase by the door, but there was no response. I went upstairs, the hallway still smelling faintly of lavender, Emily's latest obsession. This made me feel strange and uneasy, but I didn't think much of it. They could have gone to the park or to get ice cream, but as I approached the study to drop off some work documents, I still felt something was wrong. I noticed that the door was open, and I walked in to find my desk in a mess, with documents scattered all over the place. I muttered a curse under my breath. Josh likes to rummage through my desk, pretending he is an explorer on some great mission. I smiled faintly and began to tidy up the mess, arranging the papers into neat piles. Then I saw an ordinary manila folder with a stack of old invoices inside. I opened it curiously, and inside there was not a single piece of paper, just a clear, official-looking piece of paper with the name of a genetic testing laboratory. The paternity test results. My vision went dark, my hands trembled. It said Josh's name and then my name, as the presumed father. The result was very clear. 99.9% certainty, negative. I read it over and over again, my brain refusing to accept the words. Each syllable hammered against my skull. My knees went weak. I slumped into the chair, the world spinning, my breathing growing shallower and shallower. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "This can't be right." My mind raced. Why would something like this exist? Why would Emily or anyone take a test like this? The possibility that Josh wasn't my biological son stung, leaving me naked and exposed. It's my son, he has to be my son. I've been with him every step of the way, every scrape, every late-night bedtime story. Josh is my child, but the document in my hands was telling me a truth I wasn't ready to hear. I broke out in a cold sweat and sat there, my mind replaying every moment of the past 8 years. How could I have missed it? Was there ever a moment, a look, a fleeting second when Emily betrayed me? Her smile, her distant smile, the image of her working late into the night in the office, all the things I had ignored came flooding back. I carefully set the folder down as if it were a ticking time bomb. Hours passed as I sat there, doubt and denial racing through my mind. The sun sank lower and lower on the horizon, the house growing darker and darker, but I couldn't move. Reality was too heavy. When the sound of Emily's car pulling into the driveway pulled me back to the present, my heart began to race again. She walked into the house, her cheerful voice carrying. She had no idea she was about to walk into a storm, but I couldn't face her, not yet. I needed answers, real, irrefutable answers. Not just for myself, but for Josh and for this family that I thought I knew. Emily walked up the stairs, her high heels tapping lightly on the wood. I put the folder back where I found it, my hands still shaking, but I forced myself to stand up and give her a vacant smile. If she noticed the tension in my face, she said nothing. "Hey, sweetheart." She leaned in to kiss me, but I couldn't respond. "Is everything okay?" Yes, I lied. My voice could barely remain even, and despite having worked all day, the words on that document screamed at me, tearing me to shreds. The morning sun shone through the kitchen window, and I sat at the dining table, the manila folder in front of me like a loaded weapon. My hands are clenched into fists, the knuckles white. Emily hums a tune softly as she walks around the kitchen, completely unaware of the storm that is about to break. She asks me for coffee, her tone relaxed, as if everything is fine in our little world. I don't answer, my eyes fixed on the folder, its weight suffocating me. The words of the test results are etched in my mind, cruelly mocking me. Every moment of doubt. Every late night I wonder if I've missed any memory of Emily. Vengeful Jack rushed back. Her voice trembled as she turned around and finally noticed the tense atmosphere in the room. "What's wrong?" Without a word, I picked up the folder and threw it on the table. It slid across the surface and stopped by her hand. Emily frowned and looked down at it, confusion flashing across her face. She opened it, lips parted, and scanned the pages. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her pale and frozen. "What is this?" she asked. Her voice was almost inaudible. "You tell me," I said. My voice was low and trembling with suppressed anger. "Go on, explain." Her hands trembled as she set the paper down. "Jack, it's not what it looks like." I let out a bitter laugh. The sound was strange and sharp. "It really isn't what it looks like. It's the best you've got." She swallowed hard. Her eyes darted around the room, as if looking for an escape. "It's nothing. I mean, it's a misunderstanding, a mistake." I gave the table a sharp thump, startling her. "Don't insult my intelligence, Emily. It's a misunderstanding, a mistake. It says here that Josh was with my son. So please tell me, how could this have happened?" She opened her mouth, then gasped like a fish and shut it again. "It was a long time ago, before we were married, I'm not even sure." I broke into a sudden laugh, leaning forward in my chair, interrupting her. 12 years, Emily. 12 years of marriage, raising a child, trusting you, and you didn't think I should know." Tears welled up, yes, but they only fueled my anger. "Jack, I don't think it matters. You're his father. You've always been his father. And the other man, he wasn't there. He was never there." I suddenly stood up and shouted, making a harsh sound as my chair scraped against the floor. "You think that makes it okay? You lied to me, to Josh his whole life." Her tears welled up, her voice choked as she tried to defend herself. "I was scared, Jack. I didn't know how to tell you. After Josh was born, it didn't matter anymore. You loved him. You were his father." I stared at her in disbelief. "It doesn't matter." My voice trembled. The weight of betrayal made me gasp for breath. It meant something to me, Emily. It meant something to me. Every time I looked at him, I felt like he was part of us, mine. You took that away. You decided it didn't matter, but you didn't give me a choice." She sobs openly, her hands clutching the table edge. "Jack, please, I made a mistake, but it doesn't change anything. Josh doesn't even know he's yours, he's ours." "No," I shake my head, "not mine. You lied to me. You lied to me for years, every day." Emily's face is full of sorrow, and her sobs become desperate. "I didn't want this. There was a night I wasn't even sure. Not until after he was born. I raised my voice. You lied to me for over 10 years. And you expect me to believe that was just one night? You didn't even hear yourself." She reached out to me, but I stepped back. Her touch was like poison. "Jack, I'm sorry, I was wrong, but you have to believe me. I never wanted to tell you this because I didn't want to hurt you or Josh. You're his father, in every important way." I pointed to the folder on the table, my hand shaking, and I said, my voice low and deadly, "This isn't just a piece of paper. It proves that our entire marriage was built on a lie, so tell me, Emily. Why should I believe anything you say now?" She slumped into a chair, her hands around her head, sobbing echoes through the room, but I felt no compassion, not now. Only the weight of betrayal and the aching emptiness of the life I thought I understood crumbling around me. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her with the folder and her excuses. I needed air. I needed space. And most of all, I needed to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. The door to my old apartment creaked open. It was a place I hadn't set foot in for almost 10 years. Dust clung to the surfaces. The air was as suffocating as a grave, and it was the life I had left behind. It was the only place I could think of. The weight of Emily, the lies and wasted years. I put the key on the counter and walked towards the liquor cabinet, one of the few things I left behind years ago. I take out a bottle of whiskey, pour a glass, and collapse on the sofa. The dim light from the street lamp barely illuminates the room. I stare at the amber liquid swirling in the glass as the morning's argument plays over and over in my head. I forgive her tears and her desperate attempts to turn back the clock as if it were a misunderstanding, which only fuels my anger. "One night," she said, "one night, she changed the entire course of my life without my knowledge or consent." I brought the glass to my lips and drained it in one go. The burning sensation in my throat momentarily made me forget my troubles, but the feeling was fleeting. I tightened my grip on the glass and thought about Josh, his smile, his laugh, the way he always looked up at me with those trusting eyes. And all this time, he was never mine. "No," I muttered, shaking my head as if I could shake the thought from my mind. "He was mine. I raised him, taught him to ride a bike, tucked him in at night, covered him up at night. He was the one who called me dead, but the harsh truth hovered like a shadow in the corner of the room. I thought back to the days when I worried about Emily. She seemed distant, late nights, business trips. Was I blind, or was I just desperate to believe in us that I ignored all the warning signs? Anger built up inside me, hot and suffocating. I looked at the glass in my hand, my fingers trembling as I gripped it tighter. Then I threw the glass quickly across the room. It hit the wall and the shards scattered across the floor like the wreckage of a marriage. I stood there, my chest heaving, staring at the destruction I had caused, but it didn't make me feel any better, nor did it ease the pain of betrayal. The room felt too small, the air too thick. I picked up the whiskey bottle and poured myself another drink, but my hand shook too much to bring it to my lips, so I dropped it onto the counter. The sharp clatter echoed in the silence. I couldn't go on like this. I couldn't let this feist, this Emily lie devour what little dignity I had left. I need to get a grip, take action, and take back my life before it completely falls apart. I take out my mobile phone and dial a number I haven't called for years. The phone rings. I stare at the broken glass on the floor, the jagged edges gleaming in the dim light. I understand the symbolism. Everything I thought I knew is broken. Jake's husky voice comes through on the other end. It's Mark, my lawyer, an old friend who helped me negotiate the purchase of our house. It's been a while. What's wrong? I hesitate, my words stuck in my throat, but then Emily's pale face as she confronted me comes to the surface, and that pushes me to take a step forward. I need to file for divorce, I say, my voice hoarse but firm. There's a pause. Divorce. Mark responds in a cautious tone. What happened? I close my eyes and run my hand through my hair. It's complicated, Mark, but I need to sort it out soon. There's another pause and I can almost hear the gears in his head turning. Well, he says, in the end we need to meet, details, assets, custody, all that. Do you want to talk about what happened, or should I just talk about the legal stuff? I let out a wry laugh. Just the legal stuff, trust me, you don't want to hear the rest. Okay, he says, and his tone becomes businesslike again. Come to the office tomorrow and we'll get started. Thanks, I mumbled, hung up the phone, and a few moments later I was standing there, staring blankly at the mess on the floor, still holding the phone in my hand. What I had just done weighed on me like a heavy blanket. The word divorce sounded strange, like someone else's story, but now it was my story. I poured the rest of the whiskey down the sink, and a pungent smell filled the air as the water gurgled away into the drain. I didn't need it anymore. The anger that had driven me to this point was still there, simmering just below the surface, but I knew it couldn't sustain me. I needed to be clear-headed. I needed a plan. Tomorrow, I will begin to take back control of my life, but tonight I sit in the silence of the old apartment, my only company, the ghosts of what I thought was real life. The lawyer's office is cold and impersonal, the kind of place where life falls apart without a sound. I sit across from Mark, the divorce papers spread out on his desk like a battlefield map. He explains the process in clinical terms, but I barely listen, my mind a blur. The words divorce, custody, and assets hover like ghosts. All you need to do is sign here, Mark said, sliding the pen across the desk. My hand hovered over the paper. The weight of this decision was suffocating me. I had no doubts, no reason to doubt, and I signed the document. With each stroke, I felt like I was free from my life. I thought I knew what to do. I said firmly that it was over. I pushed the document back at him. Mark nodded with an inscrutable expression. Do you want to discuss custody, or shall we leave it for now? I hesitated, my chest tightening. Custody. Josh, the boy I had raised like a son, still didn't know the truth. I shook my head. Not now. Let Emily deal with it for now. I need to leave now. Mark looked like he wanted to say something else, but he didn't. He just nodded and slipped the papers and slipped it into the folder. Okay, I'll file these and keep you posted. I left the office feeling hollow, like a shadow that had once walked at my feet, and drove back to the car. Before I knew it, I was driving home, to our home, where everything had fallen apart. Everything seemed to blur on the way home. The radio played softly in the background as I rehearsed conversations I didn't want to have. Anger simmered just below the surface as I pulled into the driveway. I didn't know who I was angrier at, Emily for her betrayal or myself for still caring about the house. When I walked in, the house was quiet. Emily was sitting in the living room, her posture tense, her hands clutching the edge of the sofa cushion. Josh's school bag was by the door, a reminder that life would never be the same again. When I walked in, she looked up, her eyes wide, watching me carefully. "Jack," she began softly, almost pleadingly, "can we talk?" I put my keys on the table and stared at her, my jaw tight. There was nothing left to talk about. Her face crumpled, and for a moment I almost felt guilty. But then I remembered the lies, the years of deceit and the pain in my chest that made me turn and steal away. I went to Mark. I said my voice was cold. The divorce papers had been filed. It was done. Emily's breathing quickened, and she covered her mouth with her hand. I saw tears well up in her eyes, but they didn't touch me. Not anymore. "Jack, please," she whispers. "Don't do this. Think of Josh. Think of us." I smile bitterly and shake my head. There hasn't been us for a long time. Emily, and for Josh, he deserves better. She stands up, her hands shaking. "I made a mistake." Her voice trembles, "but that doesn't change what we built together, and it doesn't change the fact that you're his father." I clenched my fists and tried to keep my voice steady. "You can't decide what's important, Emily. You made that choice 12 years ago when you cheated on me and cheated on him." Josh's footsteps echoed up the stairs, and we both froze. He stood there, his eyes wide with confusion, clutching his beloved book. "What's wrong?" he asked. His voice was small. My heart broke all over again. I took a step towards him and managed to force a smile, feeling like my face was going to crack. "It's nothing, mate, just grown-up stuff." He looked at us, his brow furrowed. "Are you angry?" I swallowed hard and crouched down in front of him. "No, Josh, I'm not angry, but things are going to be a little different." "Okay." Josh nodded slowly, still unsure. "But he trusts me. He always has." "Okay," he whispered. I stood up and looked at Emily, who was looking at us with tears in her eyes. "This is a better option for everyone," I said, my voice firmer. "Josh doesn't need this. What he needs is stability, and I can't give him that, not like this." Emily didn't respond, just nodded. Her shoulders slumped, as if her actions had finally crushed her. I turned to Josh and rubbed his hair. "Go get your shoes, mate. We're going for a drive." A little surprise crossed his face, confusion giving way to excitement, and he ran upstairs. I took one last look at Emily. I had so much to say, so many things to shout out, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. This was the end. "Emily," I said, my voice calm but firm, "this is how things have to be for all of us, and there's no need to wait for a response." I turned around and walked out the door, the sound of the door closing behind me echoing in my ears. Life after a divorce is not living, it is surviving. In the first year after the divorce, I spent each day like a ghost, going to work, coming home, staying in the apartment, staring at the walls, wondering what had gone wrong. At first, this silence was unbearable, like a vacuum that sucked all the noise and warmth out of my world. The echoes of laughter and footsteps that once filled my home haunted me in the silence. Josh, I thought of him every day, despite my efforts to stop. I tell myself that cutting off all contact was the best thing I could do for him, that he deserves a stable life, free from the pain and anger between Emily and me. But every day I wonder if I made the right choice, or if I'm just too weak to face the truth. I'm used to being alone. I don't have much family to fall back on. My parents died many years ago. I'm an only child. My friends drifted away after the divorce, and I don't know how to deal with my broken life, so I've adapted. I work overtime, find hobbies to fill the void, and tell myself that loneliness is freedom. But deep down I know it's just a hollow substitute for the connections I've lost. As the years pass, I stop caring about the time and stop asking mutual friends about Josh or Emily. They feel distant and fictional, like characters in a book I've already read. In the evening, after I've been gone from their lives for 8 years, someone knocks on my door. I frowned. I hadn't expected anyone to come, and I rarely had visitors. I stumbled to the door, opened it, and found a young man standing there, his figure silhouetted against the setting sun. He looked to be in his late teens, tall and thin, and his face was both familiar and strange. "Can I help you?" I asked cautiously. The young man hesitated, his lips twitching into a nervous smile. The word "Dad" hit me like a punch in the stomach. I blinked, trying to process what I was seeing, and then it hit me. Those eyes, those brown eyes exactly like mine. My breath caught in my throat. "Josh," I whispered, barely audible. His smile grew wider, although there was something about it that I couldn't quite place, maybe fear, maybe despair. Yes, it was me, and for a moment I couldn't move. Time seemed to collapse before my eyes, and I saw the boy I had left behind. Before my mind could react, my feet had already taken the first step. I pulled him into my arms. At first he stiffened, but then he relaxed his arms and embraced me in return. "Come in," I said, and pointed towards the living room. "For God's sake, come in." Josh walked in and looked around the apartment. It wasn't big, just a small, simply furnished space, but he didn't seem to mind. He sat down on the edge of the sofa and played with the frayed edges of his jacket. I can see now that he looks tired and worn, not like a teenager. "What are you doing here?" I asked him, sitting opposite him, not because I was excited to see you, but because it had been a long time. Josh hesitated, his gaze falling to the floor. "I don't know where else to go." He admitted that things were bad, really bad. Bad. My stomach, really bad. "What do you mean? What's going on?" He sighed and ran his hand through his hair. "Mom lost her job a few months ago. She's been trying to find another one, but it's hard. We've been struggling to pay the rent and the bills. She won't admit how bad it is, but I can see it. I hear her crying at night." I sat back, the weight of his words sinking in. Emily was unemployed and struggling to make ends meet. It wasn't what I'd expected to hear, and despite everything that had happened between us, I'd never wished her hardship, especially not when it affected Josh. "Why didn't you come sooner?" I asked softly. Josh shrugged. His eyes were blurred. "I thought you didn't want to see me. I mean, after everything that's happened," his words hit me like another blow, and guilt wells up. I leaned forward and put a hand on his shoulder. "Josh, you're my son, and that won't change. I'm sorry if I gave you any other idea." He nods, his lips pressed into a thin line as he struggles to hold back tears. "I don't know if you'll help, but I have to try. Mom doesn't know I'm here, and if she finds out, she'll kill me." I said firmly that I would help you with whatever you need. Josh looked up, a look of relief on his face. "Really? Yes. Find a way to fix this. I don't know how, but I promise." For the first time in years, I felt like I had a purpose again, a reason to fight. Josh had returned to my life, and I wasn't going to let him down. Not this time. The days after Josh's visit flew by. I had a purpose, a reason to focus on helping my son. The days of loneliness and regret faded into the background as I threw myself into repairing our broken family. It was no longer about Emily, but Josh. Even if I didn't know it at the time, it was always about Josh. The first step in a father's promise is to understand their situation. Josh gave me the details, his voice weary from being forced to grow up too soon. Emily had been laid off from her marketing job after budget cuts. At first, she had managed to scrape by on her savings, but with no steady work for months. Bills were piling up, and she was forced to take odd jobs that didn't pay enough to cover all the expenses. Josh had started skipping lunch at school to save money for groceries. Listening to him tell me this felt like a dagger in my chest. I had left thinking I was doing the right thing, but my absence was only adding to their burden. I couldn't let this continue. One evening, after another long conversation about their predicament, I said, "I'll help you both. We'll work this out together." His eyes were wet, but he didn't cry, just nodded. The weight on his shoulders seemed to have lightened a little. "Extend an olive branch." The hardest part was contacting Emily after everything that had happened. The thought of hearing her voice again was almost unbearable. But it wasn't about me, it was about Josh. When I called her, she didn't answer the phone. The second her voice came through, a cautious and tired Jack, Emily said, "My voice is more stable than expected. I know Josh came to see me." There was a long pause, followed by a deep sigh. "I told him not to bother you." I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. "Emily, I want to help. He's my son too." Whatever happened between us, her voice cracked again when she spoke for the second time. "I didn't think you'd care. After all, I don't," I said firmly, as I always did. "Let me help them." There was a pause. "What do you want to do?" Over the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly to get them back on their feet. I paid their rent and utility arrears and helped Emily find a stable job through an old friend. At first she was hesitant, her pride hurt, but she eventually accepted the help. Josh started spending weekends with me, and we rebuilt the bond that had been severed by time and distance, but never broken. We talked about everything: school, his friends, his plans for the future. He wanted to go to university and study engineering. I promised him that I would help him achieve his dream, no matter what it took. I maintained polite interactions with Emily, but we did not rekindle our old relationship or return to the past. However, we both held forgiveness and silent understanding in our hearts. For Josh's sake, we both had to let go of the past. Years later, when I sat in the audience at Josh's graduation, I felt a sense of pride I hadn't felt in years. My son was tall and confident, and he had overcome the chaos and pain of a broken home to become an outstanding person. When he walked across the stage and shook the dean's hand, I couldn't help cheering louder than anyone else there. Afterwards, as we stood in the bustling crowd, Josh pulled me into his arms and thanked his father. He said with emotion in his voice, "Thank you for asking the question, even though I already knew he was there." He simply said. I looked at him, my chest filled with love and gratitude. Always Josh always ends this chapter, and now looking back, I realize that life rarely goes according to plan. It twists and turns, derailing you and forcing you to reassess what really matters. When I walked out of that house so many years ago, I thought I had lost everything. But I hadn't lost the love between a father and son. It is unbreakable, no matter what obstacles come along. In the end, it wasn't about betrayal or heartbreak, but about redemption, about the realization that even in the darkest moments, there is always a way to rebuild, to heal, to move on. As I watched Josh walk towards a bright future, I knew I had finally found peace, not because I had forgotten the pain of the past, but because I had chosen to let go.